um, definitions and understandings coming through: surviving lows, ability to cope, ability to keep developing, to have staying power, to be focused and positive, reinvention of the self, bouncing back and bouncing forward. Really, really interesting definitions and understandings. Bouncing back from difficult situations.
Thank you, thank you. So Julie, I'd love to ask for your perspective and experience of what resilience means to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, and thanks to everyone on the call who's been popping in. I've been seeing them come up, and I think maybe before I give my personal perspective and view, is to provide a little bit of context, because I think that helps to kind of create the frame for what I've experienced from a resilience perspective. And I think the first thing is that I've been struggling, or have struggled with chronic illness since I was 16 years old. And for those 3 years, from 16 to 18, is where I was pretty much bedridden for that time. I did go to school for about 2 hours a day, but it was a challenging 2 years. And I think at that, 3 years. And I think at that point, I didn't actually have the language to, I guess, contextualize what I was experiencing. Throughout my 20s, it got a bit better, a few kind of highs and lows, ups and downs. And in my 30s, where I am now, have been some wonderful times and moments, but I've actually just come out of a really difficult past 2 years. So when I think about resilience in my particular sort of chronic illness struggle journey, it's really kind of looked at, you know, I know that the kind of typical definition is around sort of bouncing back. And what I've sort of experienced is that it's actually, for me, been a deep, painful, or it's at times brutal, slow emergence from one state into a different state. And so when I think about that bouncing back or that spring back, I almost haven't always experienced that. For me personally, it's been kind of a going into the depths of my being to be able to like come out the other side, maybe not fundamentally healthy or well, but almost with a different perspective, almost with a different starting point. And so when I think about it in terms of my past kind of 20 years on this particular road, is that I've had to almost form an adaptive level of resilience, which essentially means that as things come our way, how are we able to kind of deal with them? And so when I think about my resilience definition in totality, the cornerstone of it for me is really around our ability to be vulnerable. And so there's vulnerability sort of looks like strength, but feels like weakness. And I think that's a really key kind of point to drive home. And for me, it hasn't been this linear process towards wellness. It's been messy, chaotic. You know, my mom's actually on the call, and I remember when I was 16 saying to her, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to do this. And her response to me always was, I know, my darling, but at least just wait until I've had my hair done. And so it was this, she was able to come into that moment with me and has really held my hand during this time. So when I think of resilience, to kind of bring it together, it's really about the ability to face adversity. So to not fight it, to stop fighting it, but to actually face it with that strength that we have deep down, our ability to adapt to what comes, because life is full of struggle. And for me, the key word, and maybe this is where I'll kind of bring my thoughts to a close, it's around movement. So it's the ability to move forward. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, and it doesn't kind of change our whole life overnight. But if I can sometimes just open my eyes the next day, I feel like I've actually cultivated a level of resilience within myself that can come from nowhere else. And so I think, you know, to sort of just bring it to a close, it's facing it, it's adapting to what's coming, and it's just a movement. It's a movement in a forward direction, which aligns deeply to our purpose, our essence. And really, I've had some dark nights of the soul where I've thought to myself, there will be a renewal that will come in the morning. And if I can just open my eyes the next day, I might still be sick, but I'll definitely still be here. And I think that's really what it's kind of meant and started to look like for me.
Yeah, thanks, Jules. I mean, I think you epitomize for both Nicole and I all that resilience means. And there's a beautiful comment in the chat from Kurt Anthony who says, resilience reminds me of the sisal plant, where fibers are super strong because of enduring harsh growing conditions. And that just sums up everything about the growth, the movement, the flourishing, but through the adversity, but being able to acknowledge the vulnerability. So Nicole, your understanding of resilience and all that it means to you?
And it means all those things. And Julie, thank you for sharing, as always. It's interesting because if I look back at my life, and sometimes when you look back retrospectively, you're able to realize a level of resilience more clearly than when you're actually in the process. And I've always been told and reinforced, gosh, Nicole, you know, you're so resilient. You know, you've been on this journey and there's been so many pains and challenges and moments for growth, and I'm always strong. And so I could say, yeah, I'm really highly resilient. I'm really strong. And it's only now actually through this period of lockdown and pandemic where I've really gone inside and recognized that it's that very strength in my resilience that is actually my non-resilience, if that makes sense. Because by being so strong, you know, having this kind of strength of being able to hold up everything, it's reduced my ability to be vulnerable. And maybe, as you said, you know, like sometimes, you know, to cry or to not cope or to ask for help. And fundamentally, I think also like just to be kinder to myself. Like, I feel like I've got to keep going, and, you know, I'm so resilient, I'm so strong, I can work till midnight, I can do this, you know, I don't need to eat, I'll just keep going. I'm resilient. And what I've realized is that my work and my journey is to go gently, to calm down. And it's so interesting because those are the key words, 2 words I used to always say to Sasha, because like me, he had this amazing, strong intensity and energy. I used to say, Sasha, please, just go gently. So I kind of advise that to him, but actually that's always what I need. Go gently to myself, be kinder. You know, I've started now taking those breaks, going outside, feeling the sunshine. I've now, where it is, making myself healthy biscuits and green juices every day because I matter. So resilience is just so fascinating. I think the deeper we go and the more we work with it and see its transience and the beautiful way of, you know, sorry, that's my dog Rio who wants to come in. So I'd love you just to have a reflection on that for yourself, and maybe if there's some more comments for you around your experience, you know, your relationship to resilience, your kind of highs and lows. And I'm going to ask you that if you were to think now in terms of maybe a challenge, an issue that you're working with at the moment, maybe something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, that's calling upon you to stretch in some way, how would you rate yourself in terms of the way that you're managing that difficult situation right now? So if we say 1 is just like no resilience, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, this is just too hard. There's moments that Julie shared where she felt she couldn't go on, and then thankfully her mother just said, just one step. You know, or to the number 10, I'm great, I'm fine, I'm managing this robustly, I'm vibrant, I'm creative. So if you can just put that number in the chat, where do you see yourself in terms of your resilience in relation to just one issue? Because as also Judy saying, there's so much movement to it, so we can't just say one score, but we can maybe look at one situation, something that's very present to you right now. Michelle, what kind of numbers are you?
There's a range of responses coming through, quite a high level of resilience, but there are a couple of people who are on the, you know, feeling the pain of lower resistance, some 2s and some 3s, and also some comments about, you know, vulnerability is so powerful, but yet something really, really difficult to tap into. and also some comments that are very interesting to ponder. Do we think that we mischaracterize all that resilience is? So I think throughout this time together, we will be able to demystify that and perhaps answer that. But yeah, and also the kind of dichotomy coming through. I feel like I'm a 10, but I realize that my internal battery is only just topped enough to keep it there. And if something out of the blue happens, it drains me and gets me to a 5 very quickly. So, you know, how do we move
and
between?
That's something that I work with a lot is, you know, when our tank's already full, the tipping edge of putting more things in. So actually the ideal is, how do we create ourselves as this empty vessel that we can fill, but where we can also receive, that we need to create that space. Thanks, Michelle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into this, you know, what can we do with this? Maybe how can you move your score even 1 or 2 notches up? So we're going to share our stories, and our request to you is, can you listen with an open heart and also an open mind to see, well, is there anything here that maybe is resonating with you? Maybe something that you want to try on in some way, or maybe just experiment with. So just open yourselves and see how, you know, as we're sharing our stories, how does this relate for you in your life, in the situation that you're thinking about now, and perhaps more broadly as well. And then if you can, write your insights, your comments, your thoughts as we're speaking into the chat, so Michelle can grab those. You may want to do it on a separate piece of paper just for yourself. Wonderful. For me personally, I feel that I like having things in writing as I have a new inspiration. I have about 6 of these books that I keep filling up to capture it and to review it and reflect on it. So Julie, can I hand over to you? Are you willing to go a little bit more into your story so we can learn?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I think maybe the place to start, I mean, when we were kind of preparing for this, I thought, sure, I probably need like a day or a month to talk through everything, but I'm going to try and be quite succinct and really focus on the practical elements. But I think for me, and maybe the place to start, is that 2 years ago in April, I was actually having a really good spell. I was running and training and cycling and all the rest. And suddenly I just kind of couldn't breathe. I just got to a point where I just lost almost oxygen in my body. And for the kind of following year, I saw lots of doctors, went through lots of treatments, but was equally working hard. And so I was like filling my life with work, but then I was spending a huge amount of money on getting kind of the doctors to help me maintain that level of work. So a complete almost disconnection to my being and to my body and to the messages that my body was actually trying to convey. In April last year, I was told by the doctor that based on some test results, my body was actually shutting down. And if I didn't stop working immediately, that I probably wouldn't see, you know, the age of kind of 40 years old. So I remember coming home and just like, I think with my folks as well, just, you know, crying because I had all this work stuff that was happening. Work was my life. And suddenly that all had to come to an end. And so when that did, I stopped working, and I initially thought it would be three months. It ended up being almost 9. And I returned back to work in February of this particular year. But the challenging part of that whole journey is that there were really times of people who the doctors had an inability to tell me what was wrong. So this was all going on, but I actually didn't get clarity in terms of what that was. When I finally did, one of the doctors said, before we start on this drug trial that they were doing from the States, if I could go away by myself and just let have a lot of celery juice and let my body almost get ready for this particular treatment. And I remember I left and I went to this place for kind of 3 weeks of isolation. And I remember just as I left being fueled with anger and rage and just the vibrant of like our emotional spectrum, as well as a ton of celery juice in the back and lots of medication. And it was during that particular time that I really struggled. I wrestled internally. I was feeling so sick. Suddenly the adrenalized energy in my body kind of came down, and I really got a sense of how I was feeling. And it was in those particular 3 weeks that I felt deeply restless. And I remember at one particular point pacing up and down the passage, crying. And I got into bed and I actually like cried into the pillow and I said, God, like, please just don't let me wake up tomorrow. Like, please, that's all I'm asking. Like, I have no more resilience. I have no more in the tank. I can't carry on this way. And I equally said in that moment was, don't take this from me until I've realized and seen the lessons I'm supposed to learn through this journey. And so it was almost, it was like an in-trauma growth, because it was in that moment of saying, don't let me carry on, but equally don't take this from me until you've really shown me what I need to sort of see from this. And I think it was those periods of isolation are really what built my innate, I think from a resilience perspective, it was my disconnection from the world. So I had to, and there were 3 particular periods of time where I went away by myself on different treatment plans sort of across the year, and really just went inward, but with the intention to say, like, please just show me. I can't, this has been like an up and down 20-year journey, like just show me what that looks like, and so I can let this go. And I remember that it was in those particular moments of isolation that through the disconnection, through seeing the intention for allowing curiosity and intrigue, and for allowing to be in wonder of what this is trying to show me, was really where I started to shift. And I've almost been fighting this chronic illness for many, many years. And I've never really looked at it as a gift. And I've sort of shifted in October last year when I was away. I remember one night, it was about sort of 9 o'clock at night, and I actually just felt this peace come over me, in the sense of like, tonight's the night where you're going to write down what are the gifts of this illness. And I remember I sat there for an hour or maybe 2, and I wrote down 4 pages of the gifts that I've been given through chronic illness. And some of them were really hard to write. And but as I kind of closed the book and I went to bed that night, it was almost as if the level of acceptance that I needed came to the fore. And so acceptance for me from a resilience perspective is not resignation. It is not giving up. Acceptance is the precursor to the ability to move. And if you go back to my original sort of definition of what I believe that is what I have experienced as what resilience really embodies, is that it was the moment I stopped fighting it, and I could almost embrace the gifts of what this was trying to show me and give me, that really started to actually shift me into a recovery space. And so, sorry. So in terms of that, you know, a large portion of it is that for years of my life, I've actually buried my emotions into my being, and I haven't actually, you know, felt them. And so this journey has been, this past year, of really just starting to feel my emotions, to be with what is without judgment, to be in isolation where you actually just can't stop stuff from coming. And I think if we think about our COVID environment now, that's exactly what we're all experiencing at almost a global macro level. But it's in those moments where I have found my deepest resilience, you know, besides from my parents' prayers probably, but you know, besides that, it's in those moments where I've actually been able to cultivate that. And I think the one kind of key element, and maybe this is where I'll kind of bring it to a close, is from a physical resilience perspective. What I did do is that everything that doctors have told me is wrong with my body, I rewrote it. So again, when I was in isolation and I was self-isolated and really disconnected and had no contact with the outside world, I wrote down every statement that they had said to your liver is dysfunctional, I would rewrite that statement and I would add a gratitude sort of element to that. And I would almost elevate that emotion and reread that every day, where my body starts to almost get to a point where it taps into a future orientation. So to slow down, to get really, to use my breath. I mean, that's a whole other kind of story we can talk about later, but to actually like use my breath to ignite the healing potential and wisdom that is in my body. And I think that as I've gone through kind of learning how to feel, I've gone through the vulnerability, I've gone through the space of trying to talk differently to my being that is listening to me all the time and responding at that particular moment. And then the last thing is really around just being still. And I think if we think about the COVID environment now, resilience for me is built in the stillness of our being. It is built in our ability to quiet down the outside noise, to allow our psyche almost to reveal to us without judgment when we set that intention for whatever to come up, to allow us to heal. And I don't think healing is as I said, it's not a linear journey. I don't think resilience in our context now is a linear journey. I think that it is a real struggle. And what I've I guess noticed is that when I was able to write down those gifts of what this illness has actually created in my life, it's almost as if they've started to come to me. It's almost as if, and I haven't written it since. I wrote it that one night, and I have not written and added to it since that point. But it has been deeply ingrained in me, and it's given me that sense of meaning and purpose. And if we think about COVID now and where we're stuck in our homes, there's a greater meaning and purpose for what that looks like. But our resilience is not sitting in the waiting room. Our resilience doesn't come from waiting for something to be over. For me, my resilience has come from what am I doing in this particular moment that is equipping me for the next hurdle, the next hardship, and what am I being conscious and aware about that really gives me that sort of sense of essence. So that's, in a kind of short version, my journey with resilience. I think it's hard, and I think that when we make it, when we don't kind of explore it and make meaning of it for ourselves, it gets lost in the ether. And when we can really drop into what that looks like, and we can be with our emotions, and we can cry into the pillow at night and beg for a different reality, no matter what your circumstance, our ability to do that, but to know that tomorrow the sun will rise and there will be renewal and there will be a different strength. And I think that's really where what this COVID environment is teaching me, and the disconnection from the world has really equipped me with what I need to come another day. And that's really my high-level story. There's lots to talk about, and I know at the end we'll have some kind of Q&A, and if there are questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. But yeah, like, this is just one story. I'm just a human who struggled with this, and all of you on this call have struggled with your own things, either previously or currently. But our healing comes in our ability to be vulnerable. Our healing comes in our ability to open our eyes the next day and to continue.
Oh, Julie, thank you. Just want us all just to take a moment and just to take that in. There's just so many treasured points around vulnerability, authenticity, deeply, deeply going within. The ability that you had to, when you were in those darkest places, to actually look for the good, to turn that on, to say there's got to be a gift in my liver failing. And you wrote 4 pages of that. It's just so powerful. And then about choice, that came up really strongly for me, and also space. And as you spoke about crying into the pillow, and I will share that there has been many a time where I've picked up the phone to Julie and cried and said help, And just knowing that there is someone there in those dark moments or those low moments who will just be there, who will just hold you, and no judgment, just hold that space for you. And then you wake up the next morning and you're strong again. And we go forward and we take that next step. So I'm so grateful, Julie, for you sharing this platform with me today, for sharing, but really for who you are in my life. There's no words.
Thank you.
And but part of my journey and finding that stillness, which has been exceptionally difficult for me, because, you know, we all create limiting core beliefs that we create. Some of us call it our default dramas that come out from our childhood experiences. And again, loads, of course, so many gifts, but some of my limiting core beliefs were around not feeling good enough, a failure, I'm invisible. And on the other side of that, because that often then leads to the way that you be and the way you show up in life, I became, and still very much part of me, I suppose, an overachiever, worked really hard to be not so invisible. I did 3 degrees and I pushed and drove myself, you know, and even now, you know, I see myself in that moment where a client's asked for some delivery, and I always, to make sure I'm giving value, I will go 2-3 times over what's required because of this limiting chatter. I'm actually not good enough, so my delivery needs to be more than. And what's happened is, in that process of understanding my true drivers and needs for achievement and for delivery and to try and be visible and have value, I'm slowly able to let go. I literally feel as if there's these chains that have held me, and I'm kind of cutting these chains and saying, no more, no more. I matter. I'm visible, and I'm visible enough for me. So in fact, today, I'm going to go outside in the sunshine. And I started with 5 minutes. And then I said, okay, maybe I could take 10 minutes. And then a week later, I thought maybe I'm good enough to actually have lunch as well, have a lunch break. And I still do work long hours, and that's my journey, and I'm pulling that back. But what I have done is I've implemented, you could call it a routine, I call it my ritual. And there's parts of it that are non-negotiable and parts that are a bit negotiable depending on work demands. But my non-negotiables is every morning as I stay in bed, and this comes from my brother, Sasha, which was always about, he always spoke about gratitude. That was his moment of resilience.
Sorry, Mom's just on her webinar. Yeah.
Do you want to move? Thanks. So Sasha's way of going forward was, when things were really, really dark, he would focus on what is the good in the world, what is he grateful for, and that enabled his next step. And I encourage any people I speak to, and I would love to pass it on to you, when you're in bed in the morning, before you get out of bed, just look around you, and just, if there's 5 things that you're grateful for, whether it's your breath, you know, if you haven't got COVID, you're able to breathe through your lungs, you have movement, you can look out the window and see the trees and the sunlight. I have a dearest friend, Ella Blumenthal, who's 97 years old. She was in 5 camps during the Holocaust. And she says that what gives her power is every morning she just looks through the window and sees light, sees that sunlight, and says, wow, thank you, God, I have another day. And she just smiles and resonates with everything she's been through. It's quite beautiful. So I do my gratitude, and then I do my prayers with my husband, Alan. And then we do a bit of learning together, which I'm so grateful for. It just gives me so much joy. So those are my non-negotiables, and also making my green juice every day to feed me. So I have got food, I can chug back the green juice. But my other add-ons, which I love to do, is Pilates. Now we've got all these free YouTubers, and I'm just loving what's available there. So I probably do that not every day, maybe 3-4 times a week. Other levels of meditation when I can, also during the day, taking a stop. But these are a few things that just fill up my tank, that says, Nicole, you matter, you're important. And I remember very clearly, even when I was pregnant with my 3rd child, Aura, I didn't feel that I had the right to serve myself a decent plate of food. I would give it to everybody else, but am I worth that? And that was fascinating to being on this journey, you know, and now I serve myself and I take my food because, you know, I count and I matter. So maybe the question is, you know, what for you, what are your limiting core beliefs that maybe habitually you live into that creates your way of being? And is it time to put another lens on that and to see, well, what do you want to hold because it still serves you, enables you to get your results? But maybe are there some things that you are ready to let go of and move on? So I'm going to share, if there's time, just briefly around a few areas that influenced me. So my son Asher, I was quite shocked yesterday. He had to submit an application for a university in America. He's going in hopefully in the summer if the doors open. And he had to talk about people that had most influenced him in his life. And I was completely shocked when he said me. I was like, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to kind of break this moment. And I'm saying, really? Why? And he said that through my beingness and my words, I've instilled in him the ability to not judge other people and to actively do acts of kindness. And he reminded me that, you know, whenever he was at school, I wouldn't come back and say, what did you learn today? I would say, who are you kind to today? And that's something that's very important to me through various things in my childhood, but my purpose is about bringing more kindness into the world. That's what I live for, stand for, and that's what I want to create. And one way of the kindness is about dropping judgments. So I was given the challenge through God when I came here to have an opportunity to try and develop a level of, I don't want to say mastery, that's too bold, but of a nuanced way of understanding myself in relation to others. And so I married my psychological opposite, Alan, and it's been the most incredible journey. And I'm going to just share an understanding of that, because I'm hoping that it can help you look at it from a perspective of you in relation to others. So they say at the moment, in terms of resilience, the key predictor is connection, is relationship. And we know that fundamentally, our fundamental psychology is this need to belong, need to have affiliation, affection, connection. And thankfully, and we have technology during this pandemic, thank God, people are connecting. You know, even if people are alone, they say it has the same benefit if you are able to connect in different ways. But there's also the question around the nuance of our connection. How are we doing, I call it a dance. How are we doing the dance in relation to others? And that there's a real opportunity now to take each and every one of our relationships to another level. And of course, it starts with understanding ourselves. So I'm just going to share my screen because I just want to share this core quote that all my kids know off by heart because I say it so frequently. It's by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So you can write in the chat what this means to you because it impacts at so many levels. And there's so much more in his book I'd recommend you read. But that means that we have an opportunity not to unconsciously react to anything that comes our way, whether it's a tone of voice or a behavior or a look in someone's eyes. We can, instead of unconsciously reacting, we can consciously respond. And how do we do that? We do that through really understanding the other person. Where are they coming from right now? And I look at it as mountaintops. This is another language we use in our family a lot when, if any of us are being triggered, you know, well, where's that person coming from? In order to drop the judgment of the other, we need to understand, well, what's their point of view? It's about climbing up their mountain and say, just tell me why you did that. I don't understand. It doesn't work for me, but talk to me. And once we start inquiring and come from a place of non-judgment, where we really look for the essence, we go beyond that. That's where we have connection.
5 minutes, Nicole.
And I thank you. And I find that so powerful, because I realize that it's so easy to use words when we are stressed or tired that isn't really what we mean. But if we can give everybody the unconditional positive regard and really look for the good and look for the essence of the intention, and we connect in with the essence, that's where we can really come together. And that's where we drop judgments. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's just difference. Let's just understand, and let's find a way of engaging. So understanding ourselves and understanding each other is really important in a nuanced way, where we can really integrate and understand the paradox within us and within others and between us and others. So I've worked with personality tools for much of my last 30 years career. I built the Insights business in South Africa, and then I wanted more. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to get hold of the complexity and richness and the dance of humanity. And I'm finding that really in Lumina, because we look at 3 personas and movement and paradox, and there's no judgment. So I'm just going to use the splash as a way of show my application in terms of my relationship with Alan. And you'll see he's different to me. This is his persona. So it was very generous of him to be willing to share himself openly here. So thank you, Alan. As always, I'm very, very grateful to you. So just as a glimpse, you can see he has very strong introverted energy. So he's much more measured than me. He likes to observe, and he works more in his internal world, more listening, but internal processing. Also very high around discipline driven, which is really about being very organized, really appreciating a clear direction. This is what we're doing. This is what we've agreed to. We have a plan, and now we need to fulfill on that commitment. Nicole, we're meeting at 9 o'clock, 9:05. You didn't fulfill on the agreement. And I know I'm being a little bit facetious here, because we have a beautiful nuance to our relationship. But if I look over the years, I took his feedback as huge criticism. Like, I'm not, again, feeding my limiting core belief that I'm just not good enough. And I say to him, Alan, if have your list, but not more than 1 a day. And when I say to him it's too much criticism, he'd say to me, but I'm not criticizing you at all. I'm just being factual. And I found that so fascinating, around how someone could see criticism and another one is factual, based on our perceptions, based on our reality of the world. So once we see and really understand that people are completely entitled to the way they see the world, that's their way of being and seeing and doing to survive and succeed. If we can understand it, respect it, we allow the dance. So I allow Alan to express himself in the way he needs to, and I try to adapt to that as much as possible, as he does to me. So now you can guess, what do you think, who do you think he married? So you have a very handsome, charming prince who's highly introverted and discipline driven with a bit of outcome focus. Who would he choose to be his bride? The complete opposite, me. So this is me, very inspiration driven, out there catching the butterfly, flexible, adaptable, big picture thinking, lots of ideas, very creative, very expressive, very task orientated, like to get lots of things done. So you can imagine the potential challenges with that opposite. So if I just show in the splash up, just comparing Alan's portrait with mine. And when I did this, it was actually quite magical, because what I saw is, in fact, together, we make this most beautiful butterfly. And I love butterflies. And you can see this beautiful pattern whereby, so Alan is in the purple down the bottom and I'm on the other top. But I've rarely seen I work with a lot of these, but such perfect symmetry and forming this beautiful pattern. And so Alan absolutely has given me the gift of containment in my expression, just dialing it down or knowing when to dial it down. And my hope and prayer, and I think I have done this, has given Alan the gift of opening up his heart more, so he can be more open, look at other perspectives, and be more in that place of feeling. I'm moving to the overextended now, And this is another look of what happens when we're really stressed. And I thought this was relevant because for many of us, our stress levels are heightened. And it's when our stress levels are heightened and we're tired, that's when our behavior can shift to another level. And again, we can see here, so with mine and the colored at the top, I can become quite fast pacing, a bit chaotic, and Alan can become quite rigid. But once we understand that, and you can see this complete paradox of who we are, inspiration, discipline, introverted, extroverted, how do we come together? And what I found is by creating that space for conversation, by dropping the judgment and really just seeing the other, has just enabled us. We're coming up to our 30th anniversary next month. But we have a beautiful coming together, and I call this connecting with love. And my dearest colleague and friend, Paul Barber, developed this acronym and has allowed me to use it. So the first is listen. And we talk about really listen until it hurts, to really come from the other's perspective, to observe. And I hope you don't mind, Paul, I've just changed some of the language into mine, but it's observing and looking for the essence, the unspoken words. Are they just saying, I need a hug right now? You know, they could be screaming and raving, and you can just say, you're okay. I'm okay. It's okay. You know, just what is it beyond the behavior? The value, unconditional positive regard, looking for the good, not just within our immediate kind of, we call it the in crowd or the out crowd, but beyond that, taking that unconditional positive regard beyond ourselves to other communities. And then we engage with incisive questions that really matter, not from that position of being right or fear or blame, but just incisive questions just to explore further and to have that amazing skill at being silent. Viktor Frankl's, that space in between. There is a space in between. We don't need to react. We can access it and we can be silent. And if you look at the word silent and you just move the letters around, you get listen, which takes us back to the beginning. So this beautiful cycle. So if there's anything in there that you can use, please do. And just to close on mine, this is my brother, Sasha Sorrell, very handsome, magnificent being that he was. And he used to always say, Nicole, you cannot be in fear and gratitude at the same moment. Therefore, choose gratitude. Inhale kindness and exhale gratitude. Can I please request and ask, could we all do that together for just one moment? Could we just inhale kindness, just close your eyes, a big breath. Kindness for yourself, to fill up your tank, create the space that you need to be you. And to spread that kindness beyond ourselves to everyone with us today, to our families, friends, community in the world. And now you can exhale. Exhale gratitude. And that's gratitude to yourself for all that you are and for all that we be. Thank you, Sasha. And I just love this. We can't always choose the music life plays for us, but we can choose how we dance to it. And I come from a family of ballerinas, so I particularly love this. It reminds me of my beautiful mother, who just celebrated her 75th birthday. So, in fact, before we do this, I'm going to stop my share. And you can click on gallery view so we can see everybody. And if you want to just note down if you've got any more questions, or Michelle, if you can pull out some of those questions for us. And if you unmute yourselves, we can have another exploration between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie and Nicole. I think just on behalf of all of the participants who've joined us today, there's just an overwhelming sense of gratitude and grace and appreciation for both of you sharing your stories. So much has resonated with a lot of people, and I'm excited for you both to be able to review the chats and the comments, because there's just, some really wonderful love and appreciation. So thank you. Also just, some very poignant things being mentioned. Obviously we're in this COVID environment. There's a lot of mention around the overwhelm of people sort of making choices to exit jobs, and then the sudden freeze of what all that COVID meant, and questioning their own resilience in terms of, do I actually have the emotional, physical and mental strength to deal with this? A fascinating insight as well from Daniel about, we're in this great pause, and so much of what we push forward on, the universe shows us otherwise. And I think that relates a lot to your story, Jules, of actually just needing to kind of exit for a bit and be still and appreciate the silence. Howard also mentioned something fascinating about this difference between individual resilience and what we model out to the world or to our families, comparative to collective resilience, which, you know, is quite a paradox, but potentially that as a you know, group of people or the universe is where we should really be heading. You know, also the comments around resilience is like a muscle, which you really have to work and train, and have in that pause and reflection time is perhaps the real dial up in building the fitness. And then, yeah, also a comment from Sean about, you know, for people who maybe don't have a really deep struggle or a health challenge, questioning, how do you know what your reserves are if you haven't actually been pushed and tested to that limit? You know, what if we feel so privileged? Do we actually know if we have the potential for this heightened resilience? And yeah, I think I would potentially say we might not even realize the resilience that we have inside, because everybody's challenges are unique and different. So yeah, just some really beautiful comments, and thank you everybody for participating.
So Michelle, if I can just on your last point, just add a comment on that. And I think that's something that I've really kind of thought about quite a lot, which is, and I've actually wrote it in my journal in January this year. I wrote, what is resilience? Like, why is it important to have it? Can it run out? I think my tank has run out. Like, you know, how do I get more? How do I build it? This is rubbish. I'm not into naming stuff. I had this whole like authentic conversation with myself. And essentially what I kind of came to is that I really do think that in my particular journey is that sometimes I see my resilience has grown when I look retrospectively and I can reflect on it and see, sure, okay. But I think what the more important thing is that what are we doing in those moments where we feel that resilience, it has gone? And I think that's the most powerful point, is that, trust me, it's there, it will be built, it grows, it is a muscle, it's a fitness. But the reality is that life is full of struggle, and all of us at the moment in COVID, and I've seen some comments on the chat, you know, are dealing with either like the loneliness of disconnection, or needing that connection, or losing a job, or homeschooling your children, or trying to do a full-time job and homeschool and cook dinner and clean your house and worried about your health as a physical threat. And I think our ability to, in those moments in the day, to almost just connect to, like, the breath is a good one for me that I use all the time, is that like it really brings me in back into my body to say, okay, right, now what? And what does that look like? And our ability in those moments of difficulty to share our stories with each other is where I think there's such value. And so just on that particular point, we sometimes don't know. I don't think that there's a clear answer to that. I think we should just go deeper in the moment to come out the other side, and retrospectively have a look at how much we've grown. And that's where I think, and it's taken me many years to say this, but that's where I think there's beauty in the actual journey of life and of living.
Jules, just building on that, a question that did come through is, does resilience start with accepting where you are right now, and then only then can you move forward?
Can I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
So it's so interesting, because at many levels I strongly believe that we need to go on that difficult, messy journey, as you use the word messy early, Julie, around really understanding ourselves. You know, where are we at right now? What are our skills, our talents that we have to call upon? But also, what is our darker side? Because if we just say, yeah, I'm fine and now I'm going to move forward, what's your foundation point? Where is that coming from? And what I have found is that it's actually, you know, when they talk about the shadow, that dark side, the monster within, that sometimes that's where the actual beauty and all the light lies. So if we are able to do our work, to understand, where am I at now? Who am I? We can't discard it. It's so deeply entrenched. I mean, I had such a release, and I'm very much still in process, and I will always be in process. I think that our journey for growth and being resilient in the way we show up in the moment is breath by breath. And as we unpack one level, there'll be another level. And that's perfect. You know, like my limiting core belief around being invisible and not being good enough, as I'm working through this and I'm shedding it. And, you know, for me to put that video on LinkedIn, even though it was, I think, 1 minute, was a huge step forward for me. You know, I had a lot of fear around, you know, putting myself out there. But it's another step around becoming more visible. And having worked with that, I know there'll be more. So I think that it's about constantly opening our eyes to see where we're at now, and then what's the next step forward? Where does this take me? What opening does it give me? And like Julie, I would just recommend around that breath. I use that all the time. And often my kids are saying, Mummy, stop breathing. There's just... that expansion, you know, they even say if you breathe in, expand your lungs to full capacity, you hit that vagus nerve. That's the same as going for a run. So then I don't need to go for a run, it releases endorphins, serotonin. But there is something magnificent and really important about breath. Not only does it center us, but it connects us from our physical being into our soul spiritual being. And then we see things differently. We're able to access our higher wisdom and come from that different place. And especially when we are triggered because we're stressed or tired or anxious in a moment, and maybe we lash out or we withdraw, whatever our reaction is, breath is such a critical tool to bring us back. You know, if you think of the brain, in neuroscience, prefrontal cortex, limbic brain, this is where we want to be. But when we're stressed, we get triggered, we can flip. And once we flip, we're irrational. And we need to bring it back. You know, otherwise the limbic, once we're irrational, the limbic brain comes out. This is all the fear, protection, anger. But we want to come back, and it's that breath that can bring us back. Sometimes it's hard if we flip completely, but if we can catch it just as we're going and come back again, and maybe that's for me what resilience is. It's about that keep coming back, that constant return back to me, again and again and again. And then we relook and say, okay, at the end of the day, how did I fare? What did I do that I could be proud of? What did I do that I messed up? As Julie said a few times, I'm human. You know, we mess up, that's going to happen. But am I moving forward? Do I have awareness? And am I my own observer to see that I'm moving in a direction that I can be proud of, that's aligned to the way I want to be, the way I want, you know, people to talk about me when I'm not there and not looking and not noticing. So is there any kind of final comments that you've seen, Michelle, from the group?
Yeah, just one last question and an interesting pondering, Nicole, before we move on. And I think specifically I'll pose this to you, just knowing, you know, mentioning sort of your dance and the relationship with Alan and the male-female, and also the work that you've done with many, you know, different groups in organizations, men and women. Liz Dewing says an interesting article she spotted somewhere recently about women sort of are the ones who carry the pain as part of their existence. You know, if you think of childbirth and that those kinds of processes, versus men who find different ways to seek out pain and challenge and endurance, often, you know, via sport and that kind of thing. And she was just questioning, you know, or with curiosity to explore if you see any differences between gender in relation to expression of resilience.
So it's a big question, and in my situation, I think yes, I can relate to that. But having access to working with personalities and people and having large samples of that, I'm often really surprised at equality of gender differences, and how, you know, yes, you can have these very sporty women who are also very task focused, and you can have these men who are very emotional and in touch with their heart. So there are slight differences in the direction that you're suggesting, with maybe women taking on that responsibility of holding space and peace and heart. But I absolutely believe that for all of us in this field of learning and development, especially, that we're the light workers. We're here to raise that resonance for everybody, and you know, and I think that's across the gender. And I think that this is a time, and there's something amazing happening now, you know, within this darkness of this pandemic, where we're all being triggered to, you know, resilience, it's all over. What does that mean for me? What does it mean for you? How do I deal now? There's something magical that's happening, and, you know, we can either tap into it, and then we can transcend and become more of, or we can continue with our same patterns. But my hope is that the world will look different after this, that we'll all be able to have greater empathy, greater kindness, that the way we talk and engage, the way we see each other, the acknowledgement, you know, in South Africa we call it Ubuntu. I am because you are, I see you. And I think that's especially needed in the UK, where people can be very channel focused. It's more of an opening already. So I hope that there will be a bigger shift as we really do dive deep and we all look at new ways of resilience. So I can see some people are starting to leave. So I'm conscious of your time. I think we've got another 13 minutes. So what I'd really love, if you are willing to, is just to reflect on this session and just to write down any core learnings for you, insights, anything possibly that you are willing to take back and apply. That's our real hope, is that there can be something that resonates with you that maybe you can just experiment with. Because I think, you know, as this conversation's developed, it's just about experimentation, just trying something on. Does this work for me? Is it making an impact? If not, we shed it and we try something else. But even in that trying, the opposite is, you know, can give us new, you know, the alternative way of being could also open up another door. So just to give you a few moments just to reflect around any insights or takeaways for you. And I'm going to go back into the Slido, and we would really appreciate if you're willing to share how was the session for you. Just done it as another word cloud. Coming up slowly. And Michelle, just as we'll bring this up, is there anything in the chat that you can share around any insights?
Yeah, the sort of quite a nice theme of the key takeouts is being kind to yourself and to others. No right or wrong, but just difference. And yeah, resilience is within all of us. And for me, it's the L'Oreal moment, because I'm worth it, which is really beautiful. And yeah, some interesting takeouts around language that we use, and especially what you use, Nicole, in referencing to your brother, just sort of really hitting home for some people, creating space for our being, and adopting the term of going gently as we navigate this dance of humanity.
Thank you. That sounds beautiful. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for giving us your precious time to explore together. There's many more conversations that the three of us would love to have with you. And if for those of you who are interested, there's a lot more journeys, depth and discoveries. So we're going to put a link, Michelle, if you can add that into the chat. And if you're willing, just to spend a couple of minutes just to give us some feedback around, can we contact you again around doing some more of these sessions? Would you be interested, whether we do it monthly or bi-weekly? Would you come, and what would you like it to focus on? And in there we've put a few examples of areas that are our areas of passion, but we'd love to just to hear what would you like, and would you like to continue this conversation, and also any feedback around how we could do this differently to make it really valuable for all of you. So Julie, is there any final comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, so I just think first and foremost, Nicole, thank you so much for the invitation to join you today. I just think it's really been a beautiful tribute to your brothers, Sasha, and to just be in this space with all of us has really been a gift for me. And so thank you for hearing my ramblings and my story. I think we are in this great pause as humanity. I really hope that we use this time, like you've said at the beginning, to actually go inward while we're inward. I really do feel that there's such beauty in that space if we're willing to explore without judgment and with an open heart. And so may we emerge into a new world that is held in kindness, that does look after the other. And I think we all have a role in contributing to that. And so really excited if we can continue having these conversations in whichever way, shape or form they take. But thank you for everyone for being with us today.
Oh, Julie, that's beautiful. And to say absolutely no ramblings, I'm heart to heart space, just so grateful to you as the human being that you are, and your abundance and fearlessness and courage and authenticity to be willing to share your truth and your journey. So that we can all grow and learn from that. I'm just forever grateful.
Thank you.
And also to say to Michelle, your beautiful grace and abundance in we are the Three Musketeers, but to be here and to take that role. And I look forward to taking this role for you in another session as we rotate. But it was just beautifully done with such grace and focus. So thank you as always. And finally, to thank each and every one of you. As I look around, I've clicked on the gallery. I'll come back to these beautiful words in a minute, which I'm so grateful for. But just so many beautiful people. Jill, I mean, I can just, Elaine, I can see, you can't see everyone on the screen here, I'll mention you all, but just so grateful that these amazing individual people have decided to be here with us. And just want to say as a final word, the word that I used to say to Sasha, that I'm saying to myself, and then I'm going to give out, is to go gently. So thank you so much for your time, and we wish you, the middle word here is inspiring. So may you have an inspiring day, an inspiring family, an inspiring life, and together let's create an inspiring world. Thank you, and go gently.
Thank you.
Look forward to
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So we'll keep this open for a bit, just in case there's any more things in the chat that come through. If anyone wants to add anything. But in the meantime, if anyone's still on and wants to unmute, feel free to let us hear your voices.
Nikki, how's it? It's Dion.
Hi, Dion.
How's it, Nick's my special cousin. I joined a little bit